I suppose when you look at the housing crisis as it is now across both public and private housing, it's even more acute for people with disabilities. It's more complex, the waiting times are longer, the services that are needed, the wraparound services that are needed. I'll give you a couple of examples, and I suppose all of us could have come in with examples of individual cases and families that are dealing with us. Just more from the perspective of how families are interacting with their local authorities and other groups, particularly for adults with severe physical disabilities, with elderly parents. And I have a couple of cases like this whose parents are of an advanced age, still caring at home for young adults, now people my age in their 40s. And with no prospect of at this stage of any residential assisted living, and certainly in my own CHO Area 9, it took me 12 weeks to even get an answer as to what the disabilities budget was by way of parliamentary question, to be able to filter that down towards the family. So I'm just wondering, when you talked about the numbers of people with disabilities on our list of reducing, being over 4,000, are we capturing everybody there? Are you confident that we're capturing everybody? Because the reality of what I find on the ground with that family that I'm dealing with, his parents are nearly 80 years of age and have been engaging with the HSE, with the local authority, with groups like Praxis. I've been writing back and forth, and we're getting basically nowhere with us. And I know many other families who are in that situation. I think it's such a sensitive and distressing issue for people, particularly as they are moving forward, as their ages are advancing, about what's going to happen with their kids. One of the answers we were given in a meeting, by the way, and I'm not asking anyone to stand over this, was that, well, if a solution wasn't in place and if something happened to one of the parents, well, then that this young adult will have to go to Beaumont Hospital. And that was the solution. So go to Beaumont, go to the hospital, they'll have to take it from there. That's not acceptable, but that's the reality for a lot of people. I have a 44-year-old woman who spent 8 years living in a nursing home in North Dublin, and her case is quite public, who's working, who's getting a taxi to work. That's the reality of providing housing for people with disabilities on all different types of the spectrum. So whilst the strategy is good, I'm trying to get a handle on, firstly, the transparency within it. So why can't we be told what the allocation in each of our areas are for providing housing for people with disabilities? And Senator O'Connor, Murnan O'Connor mentioned one, and I do want to absolutely back her up on this, as I find from experience as well, there can be a distinction made between both physical and severe mental disabilities, and there shouldn't be, because in many instances it's the wraparound services that are what's letting, I suppose, the process down, and some cases are complex. But again, I wonder, have you got a view for average waiting times across for people with disabilities versus people who are able-bodied and on the list? Because I certainly find, and from my own experience, that it is much longer. On the housing adaptation grants, and we talked about this last year actually when you were here, you mentioned as well that the process is going to be, or is in the process of being streamlined. When is the streamlined process going to be in place? This was raised last year, John. I'm not sure whether you were at committee, but when we were talking with a number of people who may be in either residential care or hospitals waiting for adaptations to be carried on their houses. And I certainly find from different local authorities that they deal with those things differently. So I'm wondering, it is a very useful tool to adapt, family homes and that to people's needs. But I do find, and Aidan, in your response there, you were talking about this, that there being no sort of backlog within the department. I certainly find from dealing with local authorities, there can be, the processing time takes longer and longer as the year goes on. So I would be interested to hear about, you've actually said it in your opening statement, Caroline, about that process being streamlined at local authority level, and what's that going to look like, and what would it mean in real terms to people. So I'll leave it at that, Chair. Thanks.
John.